You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Imus.
And this week, the One Piece manga is on break, so we will not be discussing One Piece Chapter 1082 until after the official translation releases on Viz next week. In the meantime, Travis and I are going to talk about One Piece arcs, specifically our personal favorite One Piece arcs over the course of the manga and anime's publication. To begin, Travis, how would you describe and delineate an arc in this context versus a saga? Because I know a lot of people will have their own parameters, but we gotta establish ours so everybody's on the same page, right?
So I don't know what you used, and I was going to ask and then just decided not to because everybody does kind of have... There are a couple of ways that this breaks down. That's kind of weird. But for me, I generally just stick to the Shueisha printings, especially for like English speakers. That's how they're published in like full volume format. Like they actually put the label of the saga on there. So that's kind of the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to just go with whatever they say it's broken up by. I know some people disagree, and there's arguments to be made, but Shueisha kind of calls the shots on this one, in my opinion.
I'm one of those people who I like to do it my own way, and I like to go by my own rules. You could consider me, Travis, a bit of a pirate in that sense. I just want that freedom, right?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, because I know, for example, when I think of a saga, I believe that the Four Emperors saga encompasses all the way from Punk Hazard going to Wano. And I know some people would say, no, well, Dressrosa is its own saga, and that's Punk Hazard and Dressrosa. And some people will say Wano is its own saga, and then. I don't like to look at it that way, and other people can if they want. But we're just gonna have to address this the only way that we can, what makes us feel comfortable, and invite all the criticism that belies. Now, I did have a couple things, Travis, that I wanted to throw into the pot, because we could just do a simple, well, here's mine, that'd be fun, and we're gonna do that. But I did want to make sure we make it clear that we're only doing our top fives, my top five and your top five. We're not going to rank all of them. We don't have 25 years. We don't have as long as the One Piece story has been going on. And we're also not going to include Egghead. And this is something I'm throwing in. I don't know, Travis, if you even were considering throwing in an arc before it's done. Other people have done it.
I don't think Egghead has run long enough to make that call. If you wanted to make that call like towards the end of Wano and you want to say this is one of my favorite arcs, I could see the case for that, right?
Mother's Basement did it when Wano was really in its final stretch. And I think a lot of people were like, that's fine. Because at that point, Wano had been going on for over 100 chapters. Mm-hmm. Egghead, we're not even 30 chapters in. Like, come on. No, not yet.
Oh, wow, that's wild to even think about. But considering so much has happened. But yeah, no, it wasn't even on the table for me.
Right. Okay. So we're on the same page there. I wasn't sure if we were going to have a little fight, a little spat. But, well, here's something else I kind of wanted to do. I want to guess how much overlap you think our top fives are going to have.
Ooh.
And not just in terms of which ones we're going to pick that are going to be the same, but also how many you think are going to be in the same spot.
Oh, boy.
I think we're going to have 3 that are the same. That's my guess.
I know, and I'm willing to gamble this. I know for a fact it's not going to be a perfect 5.
It's not possible. It's possible.
There's at least one that you are going to not like on mine.
It's going to be like Jaya or something, and I'm going to be like, well, Travis, it's been real.
I think I'm actually going to agree with you. Looking at my list and thinking about it and knowing my history as a takes guy, I think I'm going to also say 3, but I'm going to say none of them are in the same spot.
None are in the same spot. I'm going to say 2 are in the same spot. So there will be our disagreement, and we'll see if the cold hand of the universe is the one that wins out on that 3 out of 5. Do you want to start with your runners up, or maybe we should do the runners up when we lead into the number 1? That way it's not too obvious what's what, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you think on that.
Okay.
And I'm guessing, so we're counting from 5 to 1, right?
5 to 1.
Assumed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and if I say one that's on your top 5, let's just go for it. Let's just go 4th. But starting with 5th. All right, my number 5, and it's already been invoked, and it's Wano, the Wano arc. And here's the thing. Look, I've given this a lot of thought because Wano has a lot of things that I really love. I want to point out, of course, the 3-act structure, the ode to Japan. In the case of the anime, it's some of the best work that Toei has done with the anime since Water 7, bar none. And I would also say, with Wano, you have the extended ode and flashback that is just a gut wrencher. And it's one of the few arcs where I think that Oda really perfected all of the different plot arcs coming together. I disagree with a lot of people who think that the Chopper, poison stuff was not really relevant. And you even mentioned that last week, right? Where you enjoyed how Chopper, his growth and everything has been coming along, with that included. I think that a lot of the characters you throw in there, Big Mom's crew, for example, I don't love the slapstick stuff that happened with them, but the Perospero stuff, I think bringing Zoe into it, it really was a culmination. And so those are the main reasons I go for Wano. Gear 5th, let's go. I also, seeing Luffy do Future Sight more, seeing Luffy actually develop his skills. We actually had a villain that I think was incredibly well done. I am still waiting to see how the anime is going to handle Kaido's backstory because I think the manga really rushed it. And I wonder if the anime is actually going to nail the landing better than the manga, because this is the reason it's number 5 and maybe not number 4 or 3. And that is, I do think the end of Wano is probably the weakest part about it. I think the way that Luffy lands the final hit, I think that the culmination of everything, really bringing Green Bull in and Shanks, and a lot of it just did not sit right with me. And the worst transgression of all, what happened with Yamato. Because here's my thing. You and I have talked about this, I think. When it comes to Yamato, I don't care. That's not with the Straw Hats. That's fine. Maybe later, The thing that bugs me is how they did it. And it really just, the fact that we had to do a Wano flashback during Egghead to address that is the thing that gets me to say, no. Wano, you're number 5. You had a shot to be one of the top 3, possibly, but not number 5, which is still, of course, out of 32, 33 arcs. That's still obviously amazing. It's an incredible arc. And I'm curious, Travis, is it even on your list? Do you want to do a no comment on that?
So I will answer your question. It's on the list, but it's higher.
Okay, so that's 1 out of 5 so far.
1 out of 5.
All right. Yeah. So we'll hold off then on your thoughts on Wano so that you can save it for when the mood really strikes, right?
There you go. That's the way to think about it. My actual number 5, though, is, and this one is the definition of selfishness, because I think it's, I think a few years ago I would not have said this.
I know it's coming.
But it's Drum Island. There it is. I heard that sigh. Let me tell you. See, the reason for Drum Island, make my case. So again, these are favorites. So this is definitely a situation of personal opinion. And for me, Drum Island hits very differently now than it could ever 10, 15 years ago. And that's completely situated in having a better understanding of the very specific type of grief that is being processed in the middle of Drum Island. There's a lot of talks about, when you go to the One Piece theory community and talks about inherited will, and we've seen a lot of that over the course of the series. Well, Drum Island is where that's first presented, and it's actually laid out in textual form. I think Inherited Will, the actual chapter where Dr. Hiriluk, dies after consuming that medicine, finger quotes, from Chopper. We find out everything about him, and he gives that full-throated speech as he's trapped and cornered by Wapol's men because he hears about the king being sick, and he knows it's a trap, but he has to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, a doctor's job is to help people, which is kind of the secret theme of Drum Island, is this idea about healthcare being accessible, about treating people, and about learning to let go when you can't treat them anymore. And that I was rereading One Piece about the same time as my grandmother passed away. So I hit this chapter right around that period of time, just within those first 2 weeks. And I was very, very close with her. She literally raised me. So to have this, flashback about a cartoon reindeer just come in, and it wasn't depressing, and it wasn't, I think, patronizing. I think when stories try to explain what it means to lose to kids, which One Piece is a kid's story, let's be honest here, they can be a little bit difficult to navigate because you don't necessarily want to just have that conversation. But here in Drum Island, that's what's happening. That's really trying to explain, hey, this is how you proceed through grief. If we don't forget the people who we love, then they live on through us. And that's not just a theme of Drum Island. It's obviously a core theme of One Piece, as we've seen.
And Pixar's Coco, don't forget.
And Pixar's Coco. You know, it's but even like compared to those, I think there's just something very straightforward about it because he willingly chooses this, right? He embraces Chopper's kindness. It's finally reciprocated, and he doesn't blame Chopper for the mistakes he's made. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get frustrated. He just makes his peace with his own life, and it's such a compelling piece of this otherwise kind of low stakes arc, at least in the beginning. Who would have thought that Chopper's devil fruit existing would have been one of the most important plot points ever? But, just saying. But there's other aspects of this arc that I do appreciate too. I actually love the cherry blossom motif. I think Wapol is a hilarious villain. Obviously, he's not a threat. He doesn't need to be. He's very goofy. We're here to have kind of a talk about things than we are to have a fight about things. I love that the entire flashback for Chopper happens in the span of time between Luffy's fist connecting with Wapol's face. I love Luffy having to learn to be a leader from Vivi, especially since he's later on going to turn around and teach her the same lesson. I love Luffy making friends with the rabbits after fighting them all the way up the mountain. I love that Sanji gets knives thrown at him by a very old woman, because that's just funny. That's just good fun One Piece time. And yeah, it's not the most impactful arc in terms of like scale or hype, but I do feel a very emotional attachment to that, and I do think it's a very critical part of what Oda's trying to communicate over the course of the series.
All right, you know what's interesting about Drum Island to me, because it's not my runners up. It's not. It's never an arc that's really stuck out that much for me, but I do respect it a lot because of a lot of the groundwork it lays. I know for me, this was the arc. I remember when I was rewatching the One Piece anime sometime after, I think at the time, Alabasta was being produced in like the 4Kids dub. And so I was catching up. I was a kid, and I remember Drum Island just being like, certainly like a chapter for me. I felt alienated. I unfortunately didn't have that same emotional connection based on like when I hit it, but I remember revisiting it years later and like all the foreshadowing it does, because the setup it does for Ace and Blackbeard, the Will of D stuff obviously being extremely important. You mentioned the human fruit with Chopper being obviously the Zoan type devil fruit being such an important thing. This is where revolutionaries are first introduced. The Reverie is first mentioned. I mean, there's a lot going on here in the Drum Island art. It's just, not a personal favorite, but hey.
I think that's kind of one of the fun things, because we were talking about this episode and kind of just like, even at our most negative, there's not really a One Piece arc that sucks, like an official one, that like full on, there's nothing redeemable about it, because Oda does use these smaller arcs to do like setup.
We're not doing a worst arcs ever, but if I had to pick a worst arc, I mean, it's probably going to be Syrup Village. And the only reason is because the thing that bugs me about it's not that I hate it that much. Not that it's terrible. It's just that how many One Piece fans could we have in the world if it wasn't for Syrup Village turning them away? Because they just didn't wait. They didn't put up with it long enough to get to Baratier and Arlong Park. That's my only.
I have seen the texts from Ali, yes, asking about whether or not this is necessary. I understand, yes.
Yeah, you can just use one pace at that point.
Syrup Village is not on my list, by the way.
I was about to say, it's like, is that going to be number 4? All right. Well, our number 5s, mine was Wano, yours was Drum Island. 2 vastly different arcs, but that's One Piece for you. Let's do our number 4s.
All right, after you, sir.
Here we go. My number 4, I just mentioned it, and that is Arlong Park. Of course, because it's the opposite of Sierra Village in the sense that I appreciate Arlong Park so much because it's the arc that really makes or breaks this series. The series wouldn't exist probably at this moment. Like it probably just would not have lasted this long if it was not for Arlong Park, because I think a huge portion of the fandom, let's just say, gets revolutionized, indoctrinated, whatever word you want, when they get to Arlong Park. And look, Baradier, I'll just say at the forefront, it's not on my list, and it's not my runners up. It's not my favorite arc or anything, but Baradier is such a great like preface to this arc. All of the East Blue Saga ones before Arlong Park are. But the thing that always, I mean, everybody always mentions, of course, the entire sequence where Luffy gives his hat and then the march to Arlong. I mean, it's one of those moments in fiction that just gets your blood, like I'm feeling the goosebumps, the blood is rising, and just like that is to me the quintessential One Piece feeling that I think a lot of us are always chasing when we get to new arcs. And it's something that I don't think Wano fully captures. It gets really close, and that's why I have Arlong Park a little bit above it. But Arlong Park was like the first one that really, really nailed that feeling of like, all right, we're adventurous, freewheeling pirates, but when it's going to get down to business, like this is when I think the actual Straw Hat crew comes together. They're not called the Straw Hat Pirates yet, still a long way from that, but this is where I think the Straw Hats are truly born, because they're a real cohesive unit with a motivation and a purpose that unites them and pushes all of them to their limits, particularly Zoro. People always talk, of course, of how, Usopp gets his first 1v1, and that's really fun. And we get to see, Sanji fighting a fishman, and it's more comic relief. And of course, like Luffy versus Arlong is so satisfying. But Zoro, just like off the heels of like, I will never lose again. He's still recovering. He only has 2 swords. He has everything working against him, but still seeing him rise above for the sake of Nami. Also, it's our first like backstory that I think just like, obviously the Sanji one comes close, but this one just, it really like hits you in a world that like stretches to the rest of like the One Piece world, because it's the first real commentary, I think, on like the world government and where they come into the story and why that is a functional thing. And yeah, I would also say too, I love how the Arlong Park, it saga or arc, whatever you want to call it, it really just establishes the fishmen in such a fun way, in a way that I think is like, it doesn't get the full payoff I think some people were expecting. I still have, of course, like some baggage with Fishman Island in this respect, but you just can tell so clearly that Oda has like something interesting to say with this story, because it's a story about like racism, and it's a story about how the Fishman people have been, ostracized as well. And this is some of the early, goings of that. But even at this stage, you can tell he's not like a person who's trying to both sides and be like, well, the downside of revolution is this, and this. But instead, he tells a much more nuanced story with nuanced characters. And this is the arc that I think does it one of the best ways. So Arlong Park, I'm assuming it's your number one.
Actually, it's so close. This is the thing that I even like going into today. I was like, where does Arlong Park sit? And especially since, like you said, I often tell people that's the place where One Piece finally comes together. It hits its momentum. You finally get it. It's the one that I've always talked about, but it didn't make the cut. It just barely didn't make the cut.
Drum Island,
just barely.
Arlong Park.
And really,
what will I tell my parents?
Well, the real reason why is because of what my number 4 actually is.
Let's hear it.
And I wholly cop to being a contrarian here, but it actually is the flip side of Arlong Park, and it's Fishman Island. Yeah, I know.
This isn't looking good for.
I knew there was at least going to be one you're going to be like, oh gosh, dang it on. And but man, I know, and look, I know there are a lot of listeners here who also facepalmed because Fishman Island is, I think, the most controversial when it comes to is it good conversations. Like, again, I wholeheartedly hold the opinion that there isn't a bad one. They're just weaker ones compared to others. But man,
can I say from the outset before you?
Yeah.
To me, it's a matter of expectations. There was just too much expectation built into this, because we had 5 arcs before we got to the arc that we were supposed to get to. That's all I'm saying.
And that's true. And I think the problem with I'm gonna weirdly lead this with what I think the problem for a lot of people is, and I think it comes down to Horty Jones just does not stack up compared to basically any villain in pretty much nearly any arc except maybe Long Ring Land. And even then, Foxy, at least, there's a bit to him, right? Horty Jones is just kind of a big monster man. He's almost just Arlong 2, right? But to me, that actually is the point. I think that the point that is trying to be made here with Horty is that this culture of hatred, both towards the Fishmen and within the Fishmen, it's a demonstration of how that hatred can become systematic. And Horty isn't as compelling of a villain as Arlong, because Horty is quite literally doing a cosplay of Arlong. Like he's not inheriting the ideals of Fisher Tiger. He's pulling the warped ideals of Arlong. So it's Fisher Tiger's, subtle, I couldn't get over this, seeping into Arlong, who was loud and proud about it, to Horty, who doesn't even fully understand. He just sees oppression and reacts the only way that he thinks he knows how. He's basically just a tanky, really. And or maybe a better comparison might be Kylo Ren. Like, he's angry without necessarily a target, and so he reduces himself to a cosplay of a character. But I do think that it's an important payoff to really complementing Arlong. I think it's telling that the arcs that bring the Straw Hats to stages of the Grand Line are these arcs that involve the Fishmen. Obviously, it ultimately brings us to the payoff of Jinbei. But I do think that it's a good easing us into the new world. Obviously, we don't get to see how powerful the Straw Hats have become. Their fights are kind of on easy mode because they've been training. We want to see the fruits of their labor, but we don't want to push them to their limits yet. So I think it does a good job with that. Even though, again, the villains themselves are just kind of almost misaligned. But I do think that ultimately the goal of it is accomplished through Luffy just absolutely cutting through the noise and being mature enough this time to be able to do it. I think the walk in Fishman Island, where people are like, "Are you going to destroy Fishman Island?" And he just goes, "Man, you decide. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you decide what you're going to do about that. All right, I got friends to deal with." I think the Mermaid Kingdom I think they're great characters. I love the long-term setup of the Tamate box. I think our first look at Big Mom is actually genuinely scary because it's one of those silhouettes that are obscured. If I have any problems about this, and it's the other thing that I think kind of holds this down, it is Sanji in general, just being there, existing. We all knew he was going to be a problem. It turns out that his problem becomes a critical plot point, and I guess it's a decent amount of humor for the situation, but I think that it wasn't super necessary to do, especially since the arc ends with Luffy also needing a blood transfusion, and Jinbei does that, and you get the whole symbolism. I think that's fine. We didn't need the Sanji stuff. Again, it's another one of those arcs where there's a lot more setup than there is payoff. But I think just as I've gotten older, I've clinged to these arcs that want to say more than do more. I know that sounds silly, but I do. I see what Fishman Island is trying to communicate. I see how important that is to the ongoing rest of the series. I see how it sets up the beginnings of Luffy as this joy boy. I see the things like the promise of the Noah. You see things again like Horty Jones being this kind of warped version of a character we've seen before, like a even darker reflection of Arlong here in the new world, a theme that's going to repeat a few more times. I think it was just the right kind of thing. I will admit, though, also, that my attachment to this arc just maybe actually has something to do with the anime. And that's another bit of a hot take. I think the OP for this is the second best One Piece OP song at the very least, because it's right out of that. It's right
The
out of the
hottest
time
take I've
skip.
ever heard.
Yeah,
Over Skypiea?
yeah. Because it's coming right out of that time skip, and it just nails that transition. It's like it was literally trying to be an evolution of We Are, and I think it gets there. It's not as iconic as We Are because the second one never is, but yeah, I mean, you go through, you reintroduce the team, you do the bit where Luffy's running, and you see all the anime screen caps of them doing their training to get back to Luffy. The whole thing is him running back to the ship, and each crewmate appears. I even have a hoodie of one of the panels of that OP on the back of it. I've always been fond of it. It warms my heart, and it probably, impacted my attachment to this. I will confess.
I'm going to say this because, look, Fishman Island, you've covered a lot of it. You even covered the stuff that I dislike. And for my money, Return to Sabaody is the better arc for that catharsis I remember feeling when we waited so long after the time skip to see them like in their glory. Like we had that wonderful post-war arc and such a tearjerker with Ace and Sabo and getting all that extra context. But I obviously, like, we were all just like, okay, but like the next saga, like, let's go. And I remember Return to Sabaody just was like hit all those notes. And then Fishman Island was so exciting because now we're gonna get our first official arc with everybody, see their abilities. And yeah, I mean, there were moments in it when I was like, this is great. Zoro doing his thing, and I was going back and forth between the manga and the anime, and I think that this is a case where the manga works better for me because the anime, this is when it was really starting to look just gaudy. Because I really thought like this beautiful kingdom and these characters, like they just weren't popping the way that they did in the manga for me. And I think here's the thing. I think the Straw Hats are fun in this, with the exception of Sanji. It's that the whole the Sanji thing. I mean, it's a joke. And not a good one. I hate it so much.
It's the second worst Sanji's ever been.
And look, he gets Whole Cake Island later to redeem himself, so we can give him that. But the rest of the Straw Hats, it's great. Robin gets her like Joy Boy stuff, and you get like I think that Luffy has his moments here. Seeing him use his Conqueror's Haki at will for the first time, I think it was. I think, how many people does he incapacitate? 5,000 people. I mean, reading that was such hype. Telling Big Mom that this is his turf. The silhouette, like you mentioned, like all that stuff is great. The stuff that I don't like in Fishman Island are the fishmen. It's not just Horty Jones and the villains, with the exception of the one who faces off against Zoro, who actually was a pretty fun character. I just don't like the Fishman characters. I think King Neptune, boring. The Sons, boring. Shirahoshi, annoying. Otohime was the only one that I liked in flashback, right? Fisher Tiger was interesting-ish flashback. And then you have Jinbei, of course, he's already established. So I think that's where it comes down to me. Great location. And I like the thematic stuff going on here. The Noah was such a cool thing. But just the side characters just didn't do it for me at all. So yeah, that's why I go there. But yeah,
again, fair enough. It's one of those ones where I know it's a controversial take. I even like personally just kind of roll Return to Sabaody into it. I sometimes forget it's even its own arc.
You're not alone. Totally not. Mark, I think, really likes Fishman Island.
Nah, I know I've just seen it a lot, and it's one that I would say, I realize that I'm kind of the contrarian in this case, and I totally get it. I think King Neptune's funny. I think Luffy's kind of like big brother relationship with Shirahoshi is a good bit, because he's just like, I don't like crybabies, cut it out. But no, I understand why some people just can't have it. I do.
Well, let's hear what we can have as our number threes. Now, so far, we're only 1 for 5, and that doesn't bode well for our prediction, our guesses. But who cares? We're just going to keep going. My number 3. And this one, I think that, I mean, if it's not on your list, I don't know what we're even doing here. We might as well pack up. But Alabasta, which I know for a lot of people's number 1. And I'll start with why it's not number 1. And that is, okay, look, as good as this arc is, it's not my favorite location. It just never has been. And I think that the whole desert thing, like where everything's laid out, it's not as interesting. It's not as like rapturous as something like Wano. So it doesn't really have something like that going for it. But where I think this arc really succeeds, it's one of the best culmination arcs, particularly because of Vivi. It's one of the best ones at just like taking those side characters and in this case, Vivi's not a side character, but really like the people of Alabasta. Like Oda really took advantage of the arcs leading up to Alabasta to really like bring this together. And this is where I think like Arlong Park was topped, and impressively so, like right after. And it's got one of the best villains in the whole series, obviously, with Crocodile. I think that it was the first time that Luffy had a real challenge. It's the first time Luffy really loses. Like, even like no handicaps, no sort of like, oh, because of this, like, haha. It's because he just, when it came down to it, he was not strong enough. And this is, I think, one of the other make or break moments in One Piece where Oda had a problem where he was like, I don't want to do the typical shonen thing. I don't want this to be Dragon Ball. I want these characters to get stronger in a way that really like hits people differently from the typical shonen. The typical shonen is like, well, then Luffy has to go train with a shadow figure from Crocodile's past, and then Luffy summons his Bankai. No, Oda was like, we're not going to do that. We're going to have Luffy just sort of like through the skin of his teeth improvise and just be persistent, and kind of, you know, the way that he discovers water being the weakness and the way that ties into the themes of the story. This is where Oda just cooks us a meal, a feast, if you will. And yeah, I mean, the climax of this chapter obviously hits home. Our first real arc with our first real arc with Chopper as part of the crew. And then I think that the ending with Vivi and the switcheroo with Robin, I mean, to this day, like I remember watching that in the Four Kids and just being like, wait, what? Robin's bad. Like I was so confused. It was like a villain part of the Straw Hats, and just like the wonder that invoked. So I love Alabasta so much. I don't love it as much as other people do, I think, and it, you know, a lot of other people kind of come at it, and to me, it kind of overhypes certain things. But like, I think I am in agreement with most people with like the Pell thing. It was just ridiculous. Pell should have died. Why didn't he die? Like, what do you? Come on. I think that's one of the main issues. The only other thing like worth mentioning that's kind of annoying about this chapter, I guess, is like how Ace just kind of like disappears arbitrarily. And I don't know. I kind of felt like that was like more sort of like window dressing instead of like weaving into the chapter organically, the Ace equation. Obviously, I understand why Oda did it the way that he did it, but you know, a little slight letdown for me there. But yeah, Alabasta. I mean, come on, Travis. If you tell me this is on your list, I mean, I don't know what to do. I'll be upset.
So it's in my honorable mentions.
You've got to be.
No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
About to cough myself into fits.
Yeah. No. Alabasta is one of those ones that, again, I very much struggled with. So I got a little selfish with the bottom two. As I'm sure you've figured out now. But so like Alabasta would have been like the immediate, like that's I would probably say number 6, because I think you're spot on. The really weak part is the Pell thing. Even I, as somebody who doesn't mind that Oda doesn't kill people, can be like, all right, you blew him up. At least commit to the bit. Like if he meant something to the story later, maybe I could forgive it. But my guy hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
And we got Marco instead, who is a much better Birdman. So, like, let's just...
I think we had somebody in the Discord even mentioning specifically how Vivi has this weird, like, predilection with birds between her pet bird, Pell, and Big News Morgan. Yeah.
Well, and don't forget her own attacks, the peacock stingers. Like, it's a motif for sure. So
yeah, maybe he sees her as like a blue jay or something like that. And it was the first time I ever really like put that together. It's kind of a very good point.
And I love Vivi. I love Vivi. The truest Straw Hat.
I love Vivi too for my own purposes, and I'm also just very glad in a Yamato way that she didn't join the crew. But can I just say, when it comes to the Pell stuff and all of that, or actually, you know what? I'll just say this. In terms of characters coming into importance later, at least he got Bon Clay right?
It's true. We got my boy.
Yeah.
My boy, my favorite non-Straw Hat character.
But I'm assuming this is not your number 3, so that would mean that we don't have it in the same spot.
We don't have it in the same spot. No, like I said, Alabasta is an honorable mention for me because as much as I love, I wasn't kidding. I wasn't kidding. Joking. No, I wasn't kidding because as much as I love Vivi, as much as I love this arc, of all of pre-time skip One Piece, there is one arc that I think is better, and that is.
I know what it is.
Do you want to take a stab at it?
It's got to be Water 7. It's got to be
So Water 7,
Enies Lobby.
Enies Lobby. Yep. I because I'm following the Shueisha, I put Enies Lobby, but the whole thing together is really it because One Piece came together and became good at Arlong Park. It elevated in Alabasta, but in Water 7, and especially at the beginning of Enies Lobby, when Luffy tells the Sniper King to shoot down that flag, and they declare open war on the government, not because they're revolutionaries, but because they have their friend, and we don't do that. And it sets off just a ton of scaling, very potent, very down and dirty, drag-out fights. To this day, everything from Robin's backstory to her actually crying out and deciding to live, to just how close they came to not getting out of this alive, to Usopp and Luffy basically making up in Luffy's darkest hour. I mean, it's a knuckle biting set of circumstances. It introduces multiple power upgrades for basically everybody in the crew. Everything from seeing the rest of the Sniper King arsenal to Usopp himself becoming a sword. I love that it still finds time for a joke or two in the middle of it, to actually putting Sanji on the back foot with having to get bailed out for the first time, to, of course, Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd. And even with those power-ups that Luffy adapted to so quickly after getting his butt handed to him by an admiral, they're almost not enough. It's still almost not a lot. Just the very imposing weight of Rob Lucci, who is a fascinating One Piece villain because he does not have the same kind of composition as anyone else that they've fought there or since, in my opinion. He's not a man with dreams. He's not a man whose will needs to be broken. He is a living embodiment of the very structure of the world coming to bear down on the Straw Hats, and Luffy literally driving himself off the edge to push back at that, and just how overwhelming these odds are. And then they win, and then they get out, and then the Mary shows up and saves them, despite not being saleable, despite being told she cannot do this. That boat got itself into the sea, and it got them out of there. And it is just the high that brings, as you know, again, coming from Water 7 into Enies Lobby, that is the peak moment of just energy for the pre-time skip era. I know Marineford is more hype. I know Impel Down is great. Again, Alabasta would have made this list if I wasn't selfish. But man, coming out of Enies Lobby, like the only thing that Oda could even think to do after something so big and bombastic and tense was to just start lore dumping, was to just have Monkey D. Garp appear in the main story for the first time and just start dropping revelation after revelation. He's like, man, I have really just got these kids hopped up on the highest sugar that I can. Let's go ahead and set up a character that we're not going to see until the final saga of One Piece. Let's just go ahead and do that right now. Like, that's the kind of headspace Oda was in after how friggin' massive that was. And it was such an emotional high. It was an action high. Even talking about it now, I'm getting my blood boiling a little bit. I'm a little bit hyped to have him punch Rob Lucci out again. And I mean, that's why I was so excited when Rob Lucci came back for Egghead. Like, I know he was going to get his butt handed to him, but just the idea of a rematch is such a, even now I'm like, I kind of hope they fight again, because man, I love when those two go at it. It's such a good fight.
So Enies Lobby is my number 2, and so we can lean right into that, right?
Yeah.
And the caveat here is that, like, I want to include Water 7 as well because they are so integrated. The Sea Train,
absolutely.
But if I had to be like, well, I have to pick one of those arcs and just take it. I mean, Enies Lobby, just because I gotta. But
yeah, no, they go together. Absolutely.
Putting them together is great because then when you include the Water 7 stuff, you include Luffy versus Usopp, which is just, it's one of the best fights ever in One Piece. Some would say the best.
On our fights list, it is.
Yes.
Thanks to you, in fact.
Well, I didn't want to reveal my darkest secrets. Only those who know the Void Sentry can read my poneglyphs. Look, Enies Lobby. When you want to talk about the way an arc propels a story forward, you summed it up pretty well because I agree completely. And just to reiterate, yes, Arlong Park is where people were like, this is good. Alabasta is where people were like, oh, this is great. Water 7 Enies Lobby is when people, I think, were introduced to the idea of like, oh, this story is not going to end anytime soon. Because it for one thing, it really showed us, I think, in a lot of ways, like what happens when the Straw Hats are kind of brought to their lowest point in a new way, not just from losing a fight, but from losing each other. And we needed that tension because up until this point, they've been buds, they've been friends. The hardest thing they've really gone through as a cohesive unit has been when Nami sailed away. But even then, the Arlong Park stuff, I think that we all kind of knew that like she had a reason and that it's okay. Now, Robin doing it had a totally different feel. There was a different mood to it. When we have the betrayals, we find out that like, Iceberg is nearly killed and Robin kind of goes off. And this is all after, like you said, they've just been shown that an admiral can make short work of them and spare their lives on a whim. Right. And I think that feel of like, man, this is just too much. Like how Luffy doesn't stand a chance in a world like this. And I think Oda cleverly used that as the method of like, all right, time to give Luffy a real power up. He didn't get one in Skypiea. He didn't really get one in Alabasta. He just has always been able to punch his way through stuff. But again, it's Oda subverting the shonen tropes of being like, if he's going to give him power up, it's not only going to have a really strong cost, it's going to really mesh with his personality because it requires, Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd require an unbelievable amount of imagination and observation. And in this case, Luffy just sitting down and having the time to really think about how he can utilize his devil fruit powers in a way that overcomes these barriers. And that's where it just shines. And then it's not just Luffy, right? Because you also have Zoro, with the 9 sword style. You have Sanji coming out with Diable Jambe for the first time. Chopper does Monster Point for the first time. This is where Nami gets her amazing climb attack, the most powerful weapon in the One Piece universe, obviously. And she defeats a member of CP9. And then, of course, Soga King, whose slingshot is so amazing and inspires Usopp, who, of course, wants to be the Sniper King himself. Of course, incorporates that into his own arsenal later on. And then you add in the fact that like we lose 2 crew members, we end this saga, this series, this chapter, saga, arc, I don't know what the words are, with gaining Frankie, who of course is just like the perfect shipwright for this kind of crew, even though people thought it was going to be, what's his face, the Kaku or whatever. I look at this chapter. Again, I keep calling them chapters instead of arcs, but it's because you and I usually do chapter recaps. I look at this arc and I just see so much like beauty in it in terms of like, it's so much more standalone compared to some of the other ones. Like in terms of like how like it also is telling this beautiful touching tale about the ship and like a character realizing the metaphor of the ship and like ascribing that to themselves. I mean, it's just like, it goes so hard. And then, yes, of course, like you mentioned the shooting down the flag, but then also Robin's like, I want to live. I mean, that is just like the shot, that lives in infamy. So yeah, Enies Lobby. It's number 2. I'm actually a little bit, whoa, what's Travis's number 2?
This is the high tech. So you remember I mentioned we had Wano on the list. So let's go ahead and bring that back up. because Wano is, I think, and I'm not even married to this right now. I could change my opinion one way or another on Wano, outside of the fact that it is so. You've covered a lot of it, right? But what I love about Wano is it's an entire anime and manga into and of itself. Not just the 3-act structure, but there are entire series that started and finished in the amount of time that Wano, and that's not a complaint, that's just observing just how dense Wano actually is. We had to set up so many more characters. We had to set up multiple locations. We had to actually get to know not one, but two pretty messed up villains. Then we brought Big Mom back into the equation on top of everything else. And honestly, that might be my biggest criticism of Wano more than anything else, is the Big Mom stuff. I think Oda pulled it together at the end, but the amnesia stuff, and she's kind of wandering around for most of the arc, just kind of, I am also here now. That kind of felt like, oh, Oda doesn't know what to do with her, does he? He's just going to try to figure out as we go here. I think it did pull out, because I think the fight between Law and Kid and Big Mom is excellent. Many of the fights are excellent. This one really had stakes. It's emotionally fraught from start to finish. This is the bleakest a place has been that the Straw Hats have visited somehow. Right. Despite all of the things they've seen, despite literally fighting the world government, this is as bleak as it gets. And Luffy gets his clock cleaned twice. It's like when he fought Crocodile, but instead of just gritting his teeth and trying to get through it, this time he has to go through a training arc. One Piece finally gives us a training arc, and it's not a regular training arc, because you're right, Oda doesn't want to do the normal thing. He's got to do it his way, and so he ties it into the story of Eustace Kid, and he ties it into the story of the prison, and he ties it into Momonosuke needing to rally the people of his own country and have them realize that hope is not gone, and have them do it in a way that doesn't require the outsiders to really do it. It's not Luffy who rallies them. It's Momonosuke who just needed the courage to prove his own existence, which he does. And it's his story. Wano is in a lot of ways his story. And just when you think we've gotten all the pieces into place, in comes the Oden flashback, which is just one of the most gorgeous parts of One Piece, I think, genuinely. Finally getting to see Roger in his prime, getting that ever so tasty morsel of what is the One Piece. No, they don't give us the answer, but just the clarification of Laugh Tale in and of itself opens up so many doors. Why did Crocus lie? Why did he lie about what the island was called? That question, ever since that day, has just kept me awake at night. Why did he lie to them? Why did
Oda's going to play it as a joke. You know that Oda's he's going to be like, oh, it was pronounced that way.
Well, and it's gotten me thinking about how language changes, as people share rumors and stuff, which again just brings me back to, hey, he was there. Why is he lying? But anyway, just what a great, magnificent. You can tell that this has been brewing in the back of Oda's mind for years and years and years. This is where we really get a proper answer. I don't know if we get the answer, but we get a proper answer as to what Joy Boy actually means. We get to see a character opposed to Luffy who was technically on that path. Kaido, we don't get the full flashback for him, but I don't think we need him. I think Kaido will be something we visit again later. And so having him exist primarily as the person he is in the now is actually just perfect to be the big final wall between Luffy and, the beginning stages of the pinnacle. He's got one of the coolest devil fruit powers, just the very ability to transform into a dragon. There's just that whole mythic nature to it. And then Yamato shows up, and boy howdy was everyone pleased about that. I love Yamato. I love the absolute F off to gender that Yamato represents. Our true she, her king. I love that Oda has made it so he's like, it's fine. We're not even going to talk about it. This is just how it is. the choices, now we're getting to I hope no anime onlys are listening to this, but the big Gear 5th reveal, I'm gonna remember being a part of this fan base and reading week to week. We've talked about it before, and I've kind of made fun of people theorizing and getting, but it really was some of the most exciting stuff reading One Piece week to week since Marineford. We genuinely had no idea what was going to happen. The sky is literally the limit at this point when we hit Wano, and it maybe it will move up the list as I go back and think about it. Maybe it'll move down as I get off of the high that this still creates for me. But genuinely, when you've got a series where the mangaka just kind of like decides, oh, you know what, I'm going to write an entire second manga in the middle of this manga I've been writing my whole life, and I'm going to nail it for the most part, you've got something genuinely unique. No one else is going to be able to do that. And yeah, it probably went on a little too long, but I don't think any of that time was wasted. We even got good Usopp stuff where Usopp tells the samurai, hey, get busy living or get busy dying. Like you don't have to just resign yourselves to giving up your life. You should live. Like that's good Usopp catharsis, I like that.
That's the thing with Wano. It's like, for every big issue I have with it, there's like 3 really awesome things that kind of make up for it. Because it's like, yeah, I don't love the final part of the final fight, but I think like, man, that we've talked about it before, the way that Oda just told everybody off with Gear 5th. I remember like just cheering, just being like, yes, perfect. Because I was so worried about it. I was like, this is going to be Super Saiyan 3 or some nonsense. Like I just, like, it just didn't feel right. Now I do have one thing, Travis. I mean, look, we've gotten training arcs with Luffy before. Okay. The time skip that was a big old training arc, even though it was off screen for the most part.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like an on screen, we're doing the whole thing.
Well, he also, he was training while he was fighting Katakuri with the future sight. So right. A little bit. Fair, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think like the way that they did it with the him at the prison and like his just like how buff he got, because of like the sea stone cuffs and okay, there's one more thing about Wano, we can move on, but like I just really love how you really see how far the crew has come in this one. Like we've mentioned Chopper, but yeah, like the fact that like both Zoro and Sanji get these incredible power-ups just out of sheer grit. Robin's power-up in this, and just like seeing Jinbei like really come into it as well, and all the possibilities that ring for like where the Straw Hats can go next. I love when Frankie just gets an awesome 1v1, that is just, it's not jokey. Like it has jokes. It was obviously silly, but it also was like Frankie, like having to really like, give it some effort. And I really got to give Oda props for kind of adjusting on the fly and like reneging on the whole carrot thing. Cause I think that was what he originally had in mind. And I'm just kind of glad he did what he did, because ultimately it meant that Jinbei could have his moment and have the spotlight and have time to breathe with the crew. I feel like it would have been too much to have an 11th member, but I know not everybody agrees. And I was somebody during Whole Cake who was like, hey, Carrot, she's fun. Let's bring her into the group. Then it fell in a comma. But then, yeah, by the time we won, it was like, nah, that's not it. Okay, those were our number 2s. And so far, just to take stock, we are 2 for 5 in terms of having the same. We both have Wano and Enies Lobby. I think our number 1s are probably going to be the same. That's my prediction. I mean, what are you going to, I don't know what you're about to do here.
My prediction is they are not. Because I know that I know they're not, because I remember these recordings that we do, my friend, and I know this is not going to go well. Here in a minute.
I knew it. And I think that I'm about to be upset.
Oh, you're going to be so upset. You'd be so upset.
Let's just get it out of the way. My number 1's Marineford. What is yours?
It's Dressrosa.
Oh yeah, Dressrosa. Actually, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
All right. We both.
Wow, that broke him.
What did you think? Because you guessed 3 out of 5. I'm surprised you didn't guess 2 out of 5. You thought I would have Dressrosa? Or did you think I would have Fishman Island? What's happening?
I thought you might have included Fishman Island. I don't think we've talked about Fishman Island a lot. So I was kind of like, if there's gonna be one, it's gonna be that. I'm
the basic bitch over here with Rainford.
No, Rainford's good. Like, again, like none of these are bad. It's just trying to pin down, taste and whatever. And like I said, I was greedy with the first couple, and I knew like Wano and Enies Lobby were kind of shoo-ins no matter what. But
see, like I was nervous about this just because with Dressrosa, it's like. You knew, like I've said the thing with the Rebecca flashbacks, and I always saw in the back of my head, he's just trying to mess with me, you know?
No. Let me finally defend Dressrosa. The thing that I think
arc that almost kicked me out of like One Piece for good.
The arc that almost broke you, yeah. I think it really is. Number one, it is a bloated arc. There's so much going on in this arc. It's the last time the Straw Hats are together for any period of time for a very long time, and so that already complicates things. But I really think the core of it, when you get right down to why is this so good, it's Don Quixote do Flamengo. One Piece does not have a villain as potent, as hateable, as powerful in terms of his own presence. This hovering menace that has existed for 500 plus chapters. The man most deserving of a punch in the face in the entire history of the series, Don Quixote do Flamengo. Not even close. He was a scumbag from the first time we saw him, and we all knew it. And then after all this time, we've learned the little things he's had his hands in. He's been the puppet master of all this stuff. And then we finally get to him, and you find out he literally is a puppet master. Strings. The man has string powers. What a stupid power that becomes this absolutely terrifying battle royale, like literal battle royale Fortnite situation. And it's full of absolute tense banging moments where we have to execute this big operation to release the toys, and then you think, oh well, now we're just gonna have the fight with Doflamingo, it's gonna be over. No, that's just when Dressrosa is just warming up, where most arcs are starting to wrap up, not counting Wano. So you get the toys out, and it's mass pandemonium. The people know they've been lied to, and now it's a killing game. Now we're putting bounties out on people. Now we are naming Usopp God Usopp because of how cool he did his thing was. I love the Usopp content, I do. Everybody has to start fighting. Frankie has a one-on-one boxing match with a man in a diaper, and that man in a diaper's backstory is absolutely gut-wrenching and heartbreaking and hard-boiled, and it is one of the manliest things to watch these two just absolutely throw hands and then decide they're going to get a drink later. Just great gag there with that. This is where Sabo re-enters the story, seeing Luffy's reaction to that. And I know that you hate the Rebecca flashbacks. I know you don't like her. And it gets a bit much with the constant flashbacks. I will grant you that. But I do think...
And the constant flashing.
And the... Yeah, Oda is two things. He is based and he is a pervert. These are just facts of life. But in terms of actually seeing, you have to have a point of view character. You have to have somebody who Luffy, let's be honest here, it's Luffy, needs to connect to have the emotional intelligence to know how bad the situation is, because he's not going to sit there and listen to a backstory. He doesn't need to. He doesn't want to. But he does need to connect with the people, and Rebecca manages to connect with him. And she becomes an incredible part of that story as a result of that, because she does represent just how heinous the crimes of Doflamingo are. And if you're not convinced, well, don't worry, because we're also going to find out how he killed his brother and the actual backstory of Trafalgar Law, who I will also note takes an L during this arc. Big surprise. And Luffy has to step in and save him. The two clashing armament and Conqueror's hockey combinations as Don Flamingo's about to finish off Law, and Luffy steps in and just stares him down, and we have this, then they start this big fight, and then we finally see, after multiple arcs of setup, after multiple anticipations, we finally see Luffy pushed to a point where it's okay. Now I'm going to start using what I learned during the time skip. Now we're going to start taking things seriously. And out comes Bounce Man, which if you had actually gone back in time prior to the time skip and told people, hey, this is what he's going to learn, this is what he's going to come out with, no one would have believed you, because it's insane. It is mind-boggling that the big reveal of Luffy's, like, for lack of a better term, Super Saiyan, after all this training, all this time skip, all this build-up and everything, is a giant balloon man covered in Gomu Gomu swirls and looking like he's been up for 45 days. It's bonkers. He can fly now. Are you kidding me, Oda? What are you doing? Gear 4, you think Gear 5th was controversial? Gear 4th was just an absolute nightmare for the community at first. But Oda pulled it out. He's like, you got to trust me. And I think in those final moments when he's finally given that King Kong gun to Doflamingo, the birdcage is pulling up, the holy bullets are coming. We know everything that there is to know about this place. This pure, place of love that has been warped and corrupted by a celestial dragon with a grudge. And Luffy's like, you have this cage and it's suffocating me. And he just cracks this guy in the face. It is a punch that has been the longest coming. It is the biggest relief to just watch him finally crack those glasses square on his face. And he literally cracks the landing tool. Like Oda understood how just the impact of that punch needed to be. I know the Wano one was disappointing in comparison, but can you see what it was that it has to follow?
Why else have Bellamy, in this arc at all? Well, but to remind you of what a satisfying punch can be, particularly not just Bellamy, but also Saint Charles, when you have the literally another punch against the celestial dragon.
Another punch, exactly, another punch. I didn't even get into the Bellamy stuff, though. Bellamy is here after Jaya. He's someone who's more broken now, and you realize just how far-reaching Doflamingo actually has been. And it's heartbreaking when he's, taken control of, and he still doesn't know what to do with Luffy at the end of it. We get the formation of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. We have so many new friends. We have Fujitora, who's a legitimate threat, and the most fascinating admiral, because he really doesn't seem to... what's his deal, He doesn't seem like 100% one way or the other. I have only come to love it more and more that I think about it. I think it's flawed. There are a few extra, cutscenes. It is a lot. We go from battle royale to kind of like a spy thriller to all this stuff. But I think that's Oda being his most creative. And I think more often than not, what we get in exchange for that creative risk is just exciting. And I love it. I have loved this. I have said to people for years that will validate that I have said for a long time, Dressrosa, favorite arc since it is finished. And Wano might have the chance to knock it off. But right now, nothing has ever been as satisfying as taking down Don Quixote Doflamingo. Nothing.
It's tough because, it's not that I dislike Dressrosa. I really like Dressrosa as well. And I think it's when you really break it down and analyze it, for me, the issue was reading week to week. And this was the One Piece arc. I'm not exaggerating. I almost stopped with One Piece in general because of this arc, because I just remember reading it and just being I can't, it's too much. No. I think it was around the point where, the toys get turned back or whatever. And I just I stopped reading week to week, and I was I'll just catch up later. And then I think I started watching the anime when it was coming out. And I remember being man, this is just, the animation has gotten worse since I was watching in Punk Hazard. And I stopped watching the anime during Punk Hazard because I was just I'm just going to read the manga. And sure enough, I really dislike Punk Hazard. And then when you get to Dressrosa, it's just much better to digest it as a whole. Even watching the anime, I tolerated. I did rewatch the anime at one point. It took me 3 years. I'm joking. It took me a while, but it didn't take that long. But I remember rewatching it and being I can just fast forward through some of this. And it was fine. The thing, look, everything you said is totally valid. Not shooting any shots. I will just add in my own little thing that I like about this arc. The thing that I like the most probably is it's not the Gear 4 stuff. It's not Sabo. It's not Fujitora. Honestly, what I like about this one the most is just I love the setting. I always love the setting. The way that he was able to like mix the Spain and then the toys and like just like the Disney thing gone wrong. I love the what if stuff of like what if Crocodile had actually won in Alabasta. But also, you know, that kind of ties into like with Wano is kind of like, you know, what if Luffy lost at Dressrosa? You know, then you have you know, what happens with Kaido controlling Wano for 20 years. So all that stuff I think is great in terms of like what he was going for. It's just so soon after Fishman Island, which itself was another like, here's a kingdom, the princess, and we got to do the thing. And then Alabasta, obviously, it's just so much retreading of that to the point where when you have the three princesses at the referee, I think I was just sick of it at that point, and it just it's an oddly placed arc in that respect. But I will accept, Travis, your heart, because it is truly wonderful in its own ways. Okay, Marineford.
That was the most subtle. Oh, bless your heart, I've ever heard.
Look, I grew up in the South. I know how to drop that one, and it would have been too harsh. No, Marineford. I mean, what hasn't been said about Marineford?
But do it anyway.
Yeah, look,
So
we'll do it. We'll say it again. Just to reestablish, Arlong Park is where Oda shows that he can do a climax to multiple smaller arcs. Alabasta is where he arguably like elevated it to a totally different level of like, okay, he's really doing something interesting with this Kids Pirates manga. And then you get to Enies Lobby Water 7. It's like, this is actually like, this is going to be one of our all time like shonen anime manga. It's like, it's just like hitting and continuing to evolve and improve. Marineford is where he said, now we're going to culminate everything. And I think that it was him showing that A, the series is going to end, and B, you're going to like it. Because it was him saying that he knows how and where he's going in order to bring about a satisfying conclusion. Because this is a satisfying conclusion, I think, to two sagas. And that to me is the best thing about this arc, is that it gives me hope that we're going to get the same thing with the final saga that we're in now. That it's going to effectively close out all of this story thus far in a way that I just think that Oda knows what we want, but he also knows what we want that we don't know that we want. And Marineford was that. I don't think people knew that they wanted a moment where Luffy loses one of the most precious people to him. And it was a moment, Ace dying is the most important moment in One Piece, because if that hadn't happened, I just don't think you go into Sabaody, Return of Sabaody, where you go into this next saga really feeling like Luffy has grown. I think that if you can knock Marineford down for one thing in the anime, yes, it's a lot of like run. Go here, go there. Luffy, he needs to nap or something. Like, how does he have this much stamina? He's burning the candle at like every quadrant imaginable. But you really like, you have that moment where, I know we've talked about this, the true threat of Luffy. I think you mentioned it last week, in fact, without Kiji noting it, is that this character, the real threat of Luffy is that he just immediately rallies people to their side. No, Mihawk, I think, said this. And that is the true threat of Luffy. That is where I think that his like entrance in Marineford really sets the stage for what's to come after. And I think that, like, sure, it doesn't have, I think, the larger than life villain. Like, it doesn't have a Kaido. It doesn't have a Doflamingo or Crocodile. It doesn't even have a Horty Jones. But it does have a Kainu. And I think that it similar to Enies Lobby, which I didn't even mention Rob Lucci because, like, Rob Lucci's never been my favorite villain or anything. I think that astute observation, that's kind of what makes him more interesting than anything else. He is, no pun intended, but also kind of intended, he is a cipher for the world government. And I think the world government is such a great villain. And I think that's why my top two arcs are these world government arcs. In fact, that's why I think Egghead Island so far has been my favorite arc in a while. If I had to like judge it now, and I don't want to because it's too early, but if I had to judge it now, this would be in my top, Egghead Island would be in my top 5. Like, it's not even like, we don't even have to talk about it. It would probably be number 3, just because anytime you're really like coinciding these events, and like especially if I get to include Impel Down, where you have the ultimate FU to the world government, and then you also include Amazon Lily and just Sabari. Also, I love the Sabari Archipelago arc. Just like going through like the supernovas, finding out later on that like Oda came up with them over the course of 3 hours, but like expanding the world in that way. I'll never forget that moment when we all realized collectively that, oh, there are 9 other ships, whatever it was. Maybe it was like 7, I don't remember, but there are 7 to 9 pirate crews that got here, totally different route. That's how big this world is. We've been on one sliver of the Grand Line, and here's everybody else who's been doing the same thing, and Luffy isn't top dog. And that to me was like such a great moment. It was so necessary. And it's so funny how, like, you know, Oda included it because he was like, well, you know, I don't know if Sabari Archipelago is cool enough. And so he felt, you know, he was being pushed into adding more stuff to it like this. And obviously it worked out for the best. And it is just funny in retrospect.
Oh, yeah. Oda's talks about this saga, you know, the Sabaody into Amazon Lily, et cetera, leading up to Marineford in specific. He's genuinely surprised when people say that, like, that's their favorite arc. Like, so many people have said that, and it's so good. Like, one of the joys of doing something like this is, you know, again, diving into these different bits of the story and just revisiting how good they all are. But he says that, like, Marineford's like, oh, that's nothing. I could top that. Like, you know, I'm surprised that's the one that everybody loves.
Well, that's the thing. I think Wano for me does come close in theory because it has that same, like the raid on Onigashima has that same flavor. A few things drag it down for me, and I think that it is a little bit more One Piece conventional. I think where Marineford takes me to another level as a fan is the death of Whitebeard. It's the death of Ace. It's the way that Luffy has to respond to that. The way that Luffy has to pick himself back up together and like realign on the love he has for his crew. The revelation that Blackbeard can hold 2 devil fruits. I mean, Shanks, we got Shanks in this. And it's just also making sure that we all understand that Buggy has some kind of like real place in this story that isn't going to just go away was also a nice thing, a nice little extra touch. The Garp stuff in this, bringing Kobe to the main action in a real way, in a way that I just, you know, I remember like when we were seeing him in Helmeppo and like, you know, watching him almost get crushed by a Kainu and just really feeling like, wow, he is becoming his own kind of like worthwhile rival to Luffy in a way that I love. And yeah, I love Marineford. It's just fun. It's fun to see all of these characters just clashing in a massive, uncontrollable fight. And yeah, I mean, Oda will probably top it. Who knows how he'll do it exactly? I think he has the gumption to do it in his own way. But yeah, I am a little surprised. It's not at all. Like, I'm not surprised it's not your number 1, but I am a little surprised it's not at all in your top 5. But
it would definitely be in the top 10. Marineford is one of those things where it feels like an event. And it's an earned event. You know, I'm not trying to come down on it. Again, I think it's just over time I've become more attached to the kind of like the underlying. I've become kind of a themes guy, not to like sniff my own farts about it or anything, but like I like the slower, like, let's actually like really dig into like why this guy's a slime bag, or why, you know, let's talk about death for a little while and why healthcare is so important, you know, like those kind of things. As I, like, this is not the kind of list I would have presented even like 3 years ago, much less longer. You know, we still would have been in Wano, so it would have been I could have presented this list then, but it would be different. And I think if you asked me in a year from now, it would probably be different too. I think it's a combo of just kind of changing myself and rereading the series and getting to, I think, appreciate a lot of those little quieter things more than just the event stuff. But if you wanted me to extend this list to an even 10, pretty much everything that I didn't already have from your list would be on this list.
Okay, I was curious about that. Yeah, if Arlong Park and Alabasta would make the cut, but
absolutely those two specifically, like Marineford probably would have gone in between. Now that I'm thinking about it properly, but like Alabasta and Arlong Park specifically are the ones that I struggled with the most when like making this, because I really wanted to include them. I've praised Arlong Park multiple times on this show already, for good reason. I do think it is the moment where One Piece becomes good for everybody. Alabasta we covered for a very long time, but we had to work with 5. I got a little selfish. I wanted to talk about emotions for a minute. That's fine.
So the only, because in terms of my runners up, we already talked about Dressrosa. That's in there, toward the bottom, but it's there. We didn't talk about Whole Cake Island, but I do really love Whole Cake Island. And I think that it has 2 major flaws for sure. I think one of the major flaws being just the Katakuri fight I don't love. And I've tried to love it. And I just, even week to week, especially week to week, it just was like, it dragged on way too long. But I love the focus of it. I just love that, like, it's a chapter, it's an arc. I keep doing it. It's an arc where Straw Hats know they can't win. Like, they are just trying to, like, it's a chase scene. They're just trying to get out of there. Now, the other major downside I do think is like the construction of all that, like the getting chased, the making the cake, and it's all a bit whatever. But I love the Germa 66 stuff. I love the Power Ranger Germany kind of joke. I love just so much that Sanji gets another backstory. His first one was so good, but then showing that there's even more. And like kind of subverting the chosen one trope too. It's like, oh, Sanji was special, but not really. And the way that gets paid off in Wano too, I think only makes this Whole Cake Island really great. I could go on, and it's, we should just end it as we need to. But yeah, otherwise, I would say Zoe as well. We didn't really mention it, but I really love Zoe. The Road Poneglyph revelation, just the revelation that Dogstorm and Cat Viper did what they did to protect the samurai. That moment, I think I sent it to you once as a meme of like when they do they added the music to it. It's hits me right. And also,
it's a good one.
An animal kingdom on the back of an elephant that's been walking for 1,000 years. Thank you. I wanted that.
What a cool idea, right?
So great. Any other runner-ups you wanted to add to the stew?
The only one that we didn't really talk about that I would include is Skypiea. I think Skypiea, it's slow.
I love it in theory. I love the location. I love the story. I love what happens. I just like moment to moment, scene to scene. I get so bored during Skypiea. I'm sorry.
A lot of people felt that way. I would say even I felt that way a long time ago too. But like with Skypiea, I think, and this is a very difficult trick to pull, but I think over time, what Oda has done with the context that he's lent us to the series, I think he has kind of retroactively made it good. That sounds like a cop-out, but again, in the scheme of the grand text, introducing the Sky Islands itself is such a cool concept. But you tack Jaya onto there a little bit for a cheat, because there's some good stuff in there too. But getting up there, literally facing somebody who calls himself gods, like it's a microcosm of the series. It really is. The reveal of like Luffy just absolutely neutralizing an L and being and that face, that gag face is so good. Nami still kind of being flawed and like trying to save her own skin a little bit. The fact that Luffy like is literally cut out of the story for like half of it because he went adventuring in the stomach of a beast. It's so good. And then you have to, because otherwise Luffy just breaks the entire story. So Oda's like, yeah, he's an idiot. I'm sure we could figure something out. Luffy sings in this. We get kind of Oda's version of the Chunin exams with the forest fighting. I think it's definitely one of the weirdest arcs, but that gives me an appreciation for it. And again, knowing just how important,
appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, and knowing that it does mean a lot, and that there's a lot that was set up there that has not only paid off, but really like connected pieces of the story. From the Celestial Dragons to everything else. Just what a good, and again, I think it's got a great final punch. Sometimes you just needed to have a great final punch, but when he hits that bell, just feels good.
That's why that's the thing. I wish I liked it. I really wish I liked it more, because it's like the only One Piece arc where you really just get to see them go somewhere for the heck of it, and it's not just a random island. It's like the unknown, and it's just like that feeling, like when they go up the knock-up stream and you're like, where are they going? Like, what are they going to see? And it's not going to be like an island with pirates or Marines. It's just,
and the chances are that it might be nothing. Like it was I think the only other time since that, because I think you're right, because they went to the Grand Line. They immediately got pulled into the Alabasta stuff. They leave Alabasta, and they're kind of just sailing off. But then they get off.
They go to Fun Islands. They go to Little Garden and stuff.
But it's on a mission. Whereas it's not really just adventuring. They go to Skypiea. That's an adventure. They need to go get the boat fixed. So like they have to make a pit stop and play pirate games. But after that, we got to find a place to get the boat fixed. And then from there, I guess Thriller Bark, they kind of accidentally stumble into. It doesn't happen as much as it should.
It's like they don't. It's not that they want to go somewhere. It's just more of like, oh, they got to help Brooke out, and then it's like we got to fight a pirate. And I do have a soft spot for Thriller Bark. I think a lot of people do. I think it's one of those arcs that was like the Dressrosa of its time. Yeah.
Thriller Bark is fun, but I think they're just, like I said, there's so many just really impactful stories that have been told. And I don't know if Thriller Bark, even with just the heartbreak that is Brooke and Laboon, I don't know if it cracks its top 10.
It's close for me. It's close. We could crunch the numbers. We could play a game or two, but it's going to get harder and harder as the series keeps going. We have a few more arcs to go. How about we end with that? How many more arcs do you think we're going to have in One Piece? I'm going to say
10. I think that's a little bit generous, only because a lot more has happened in Egghead than I expected.
Fair.
If 2 months ago we'd asked that question, I would have maybe believed you. I'm gonna shoot just a little bit lower. I'm gonna say maybe 8, 7 or 8.
I thought you were gonna be like 9. I'm just like, geez,
no. Only because stuff that I would have expected to be an arc or be like a cover story is just happening in Egghead. So like, what is it? What is a One Piece arc going to look like going forward? I don't even know.
I landed at 10 because I think that we're going to have like something kind of similar to Summit War, where it's going to be like 5 arcs or something. And then I think that in order to finish this out, I think Oda's going to have to do that like twice. That's kind of where my rationale comes in. But to your credit, he is kind of messing with things a bit. So like, instead of 5 mini arcs, he might just do something similar to like what he did with Dress Hazard and but again, I don't think it's gonna be like 4 Emperors. I don't think it's gonna be these mega long arcs at all.
No, I don't think Egghead goes for 4 years, right? I think we're not necessarily closer to the ending than we think we are, but I don't think it's 4 years of Egghead.
I think we're at the halfway point with Egghead, personally.
I'm starting to think there's going to be some extra fights. But I do think probably by this time next year we'll be wrapping it up, if not done.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
So or at least getting close, because if we were going to spend this much time on Egghead, like an extended amount of time, I don't think Oda would have taken nearly as much time as he has on things like Garp or Law or anything else that we've been pivoting over back and forth. But again, it's like we talked about from the top. What even is a One Piece arc?
Yeah, true. Some people would look at our conversation and be like, Dressrosa is like 3 arcs, and like we don't have to talk to those folks. It's just you and me. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's Rookie Pirate Radio. Look, if you want to hang out with us and you want to talk more about One Piece, anime, manga, whatever you like, you can hit us up on our Discord. We have a link to our Discord for all of In Between Drafts. We always link it in the show notes. We want to have you in the community. We want to talk to you. Want to hear your thoughts on what are your favorite One Piece arcs. Let us know in the One Piece spoilers chat. We also have all kinds of other chats we have a special anime channel. We have comics and manga, of course. We have books, films, games. You've been on in between drafts. Yeah, no, we got it covered. We're going to talk to you. But until you join the Discord, if you'd also like to just send us an email, just private anonymous, we'd love that as well. You can send us an email. rookiepirateradio@gmail.com is how you do that. rookiepirateradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you if you have any comments or thoughts on the show, and or just want to say hi. But all right, until the next cruise, maybe we'll be, Travis, talking about our favorite One Piece arcs again a long time from now. But let's get back to the saga. Let's go.